We usually expect Congress to function like this. Um, Massive, predictable machine. I mean, you put a national problem in the one end, the legislative gears turn and grind, and then some kind of policy solution pops out the other side.
Right. Well, that's certainly the textbook ideal. We all want a simple, reliable input-output mechanism for our democracy.
But then you look at a single actual day of legislative action,
Yeah.
and that machine metaphor just, it completely falls apart. Honestly, looking at July 15th, 2026, the system behaves way more like a chaotic weather pattern.
Oh, absolutely.
You've got glorious sunshine in one county, a torrential downpour in the next, and like a Category 5 hurricane looming just off the coast. And it's all happening simultaneously.
It's the absolute definition of a complex ecosystem. It's driven by incredibly contradictory forces, and those pressure systems are constantly colliding.
And we are tracking that exact storm today.
So, welcome to this special deep dive edition of Congress in Context. We're looking at a really fascinating cross-section of the 119th Congress, pulling directly from the congressional record. Yeah, our mission today is to help you, the listener, understand the real inner workings of congressional activity.
Exactly. We're talking the actual mechanisms of power, how we get from local constituent shoutouts in the morning to high-stakes global appropriations by noon, and finally, to the existential dread of the national debt after the sun goes down.
We've got a massive stack of primary sources today. Floor debates, roll call votes, and those really fascinating after-hour speeches. It acts as a perfect time capsule of where the country's legislative mindset is at this exact moment.
It really does. But before we jump into the deep end, just a quick, casual housekeeping note.
Oh, yeah.
This deep dive is a completely independent civic education project.
Right.
So if you want to help support our ad-free production infrastructure, you can click the Buy Me a Coffee link in your app's show notes. We massively appreciate it.
We really do.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because before Congress starts throwing billions of dollars around the globe, they actually have to start their day locally.
They do. And it's a crucial part of the rhythm of the House. I mean, it's incredibly easy for us to get caught up in the primetime cable news fights. But the absolute baseline of legislative work begins with community focus.
Yeah.
The House session opens with a prayer from the chaplain, the Pledge of Allegiance, and then they move immediately into a period of one-minute speeches.
And this isn't just throat clearing, right? This is highly strategic, hyper-local messaging. Like, you've got Representative Baird from Indiana getting up to celebrate two local FFA state officers, Katie McLean and Jesse Frazee.
Right.
He's using national floor time to point out how agricultural programs prepare local youth for hands-on careers. And then you've got Representative Moore of North Carolina taking his minute to honor the life of Maxine Peacock Holly.
Yeah, a trailblazing public servant.
Exactly. She was the first woman to chair the Benson Housing Authority, and she recently passed away at 82.
What's really fascinating here is how these incredibly specific moments ground the entire institution. Even in the middle of intense national polarization, lawmakers use this mechanism to reflect the values, the triumphs, and the losses of the people they represent back home.
Yeah, directly into the permanent historical record.
Exactly. But it's not all memorials and congratulations either.
No, definitely not. You see members nationalizing local grievances, too. Representative Kiley from California used his 60 seconds to urge the Department of Health and Human Services to step in and block a controversial California healthcare tax.
Right, the Prop 35 issue.
Yeah, he's arguing it violates the state Proposition 35 and raises the cost of living. That is purely local advocacy, but he's forcing it onto the national stage.
He is, and that local focus flows right into the first legislative actions of the day. They moved into a flurry of bills passed under what's called a suspension of the rules.
Okay, let's actually pause and explain that mechanism, because it sounds like they're just ignoring the rule book, but it's actually a very specific parliamentary tool, right?
Right. So for the listener who might not be in the procedural weeds, suspension of the rules is essentially the legislative fast lane. It allows the House to bypass the usual lengthy committee debates and floor amendments to pass a bill quickly.
But there's a catch.
Yeah, the catch is it requires a two-thirds supermajority to pass rather than just a simple majority. So leadership only uses this mechanism for bills they know are entirely non-controversial.
And in this case, the non-controversial bills were a series of bipartisan efforts to name VA community-based outpatient clinics.
Yes, and these are vital logistical facilities. They bring healthcare directly into communities. It saves veterans from having to drive, 2 or 3 hours to a major regional VA hospital for routine care.
So we saw a bill to these pass. H.R. 6007, sponsored by Representative Gottheimer, naming a clinic in Newton, New Jersey, after Tony J. Gallopo. This was a Navy veteran who literally used to sit at a picnic bench outside the clinic, cutting through red tape for local vets.
Wow. And then we saw Representative Loudermilk's bill, H.R. 5362, honoring Colonel Michael H. Boyce in Marietta, Georgia.
We also had H.R. 6963, sponsored by Representative Higgins, naming a clinic in Lafayette, Louisiana, for Rodney C. Hamilton Sr., a Korean War Purple Heart recipient.
And Representative Panetta's bill, H.R. 4288, honoring U.S. Army Corporal Patrick D. Tillman with a clinic in San Jose, California.
I look at these clinic naming bills as the connective tissue of the republic. The news cameras are entirely focused on the shouting matches, but executing these bills requires real, bipartisan logistical work.
It really does.
You have to navigate the committee rules, secure that two-thirds supermajority, and prove that Congress can actually function efficiently on a local level to honor the people who served.
Yeah, it proves the procedural mechanisms of Congress absolutely still work when the end goals are universally shared. Honoring veterans who fought for the country provides a unifying baseline.
Right.
But as we see, the second the day progresses, deciding how to fund the current global security apparatus is where that structural integrity it shatters.
And that takes us directly into the eye of the storm. H.R. 8595. This is the National Security Department of State and Related Programs Appropriations Act for fiscal year 2027. We are scaling way up from local clinics to our entire international footprint.
This is a massive appropriations bill, and the debate on the floor perfectly encapsulates the current partisan dynamics. Representative Diaz-Balart, a Republican from Florida who is managing the bill, framed the entire package around an America First strategy.
Okay, so what did that look like in terms of the actual dollars?
Well, he heavily emphasized the mechanics of the spending. The bill delivers $2.7 billion in overall spending cuts, but it still maintains $1.8 billion for the Indo-Pacific, which, importantly, includes $500 million explicitly for Taiwan,
Right.
and it maintains $3.3 billion for Israel.
And it's not just about the raw dollars either. He specifically pointed out that this bill enforces strict pro-life protections and aggressively defunds DEI diversity, equity, and inclusion programs. They are using the power of the purse to tie domestic ideological priorities directly to foreign spending.
That's the key right there. Now, contrast that framing with Ranking Member Lois Frankel, a Democrat also from Florida. She looked at the exact same bill and argued it represents a $12 billion, 20% gutting of diplomatic resources over the past 2 years.
Wow, 20%.
Yeah. She argued that drastically cutting these diplomatic funds doesn't project strength. She said it projects a dangerous retreat on the global stage. I actually want to quote her directly because it gets to the absolute heart of the ideological divide.
Go for it.
She said on the floor, "When America walks away, who walks in? China walks in, Russia steps in."
Let me push back on this whole dynamic for a second.
Mm-hmm.
Are we witnessing a fundamental identity crisis in American foreign policy here? Because listening to this, it feels like they aren't just debating line items in a budget spreadsheet.
No, they're definitely not.
They are fundamentally disagreeing on the definition of what American strength actually looks like. Is it hard military power and enforcing strict ideological conditions? Or is it the soft power of diplomacy, global health initiatives, and coalition building?
That's the exact tension driving the entire appropriations process right now. One faction views strength purely as fiscal discipline and prioritizing hard security assets for a very specific set of allies.
While tearing down other stuff.
Exactly, while actively dismantling international organizations they feel don't serve immediate U.S. interests. The opposing faction views strength as robust global engagement, arguing that funding public health or environmental programs abroad creates a baseline of global stability that ultimately keeps Americans safe at home.
Here's where it gets really interesting to me. If we want to answer that question of what strength actually means to the members of Congress, we have to look at the amendment battles on H.R. 8595.
Right, the amendments.
Because amendments are where individual lawmakers try to yank the bill toward their specific worldview. I kind of look at these roll call votes as structural stress tests on a bridge.
Oh, that's a great way to think about it. Because forcing a recorded vote on an amendment acts as a real-time test of where both parties draw their absolute ideological lines.
Exactly. It's incredibly easy for a party to claim total unity on a Sunday morning talk show. But when a member forces a recorded vote, you actually see where the fractures are. You force people to put their names on the record permanently.
And we saw some massive stress tests. For instance, Representative Massey offered an amendment to completely cut the $3.3 billion in funding for Israel. It failed dramatically on the floor with 104 ayes to 314 noes.
Then you had Representative Fine trying to strike $139.5 million for the Global Environment Facility.
All right.
He argued that the U.S. simply cannot afford to borrow money to fund global climate projects when we're staring down a $40 trillion national debt. That amendment also failed, 178 to 247.
We also saw Representative Boebert propose eliminating the Fulbright program entirely. That's a historic international exchange program.
Entirely.
Entirely. Her amendment failed 79 to 348. But, it wasn't all rejections and partisan blocking. Representative Tran successfully passed a bipartisan amendment supporting the U.S.-Vietnam human rights dialogue. That passed en bloc, meaning it was grouped with other non-controversial amendments.
Right, they grouped them up to save time. And Representative Tenney passed an amendment emphasizing religious freedom regarding the Temple Mount.
It's just a brilliant way to map the internal factions of the House. You can literally see exactly how many members of a party are willing to break from leadership to vote for a massive cut to a long-standing program.
And after all those stress tests, H.R. 8595 barely squeaked by. The final vote was 217 yeas to 209 nays. It passed just along party lines, but only after a Democratic motion to recommit failed, 209 to 216.
Let's quickly clarify that mechanism, too. The motion to recommit is essentially the minority party's last legislative gasp before a final vote. It's a parliamentary maneuver, led in this case by Representative Amo, attempting to send the bill back to committee. In modern practice, it's almost always designed to kill the bill or force the majority party into a politically toxic vote right before passage.
Yeah, it's a political weapon for campaign ads just as much as a procedural move.
Yeah.
So the House narrowly passes its State Department funding. The legislative machine is somewhat turning. But then we look over at the upper chamber, the Senate, and they have hit a historic structural roadblock.
The contrast couldn't be more stark. I mean, while the House was battling over State Department funding and eventually passing it, the Senate completely failed to advance the National Defense Authorization Act, the NDAA.
When the NDAA stalls out a bill that is practically the gravitational center of our entire defense policy, the gridlock has reached a critical mass.
Absolutely. Senator Thune took to the floor to heavily criticize Democrats for voting against advancing it. His perspective was that Democrats were actively blocking the bill due to their concerns over the ongoing conflict in Iran. He was highly critical because the NDAA is traditionally the absolute most reliable piece of bipartisan legislation Congress produces. It has passed for 65 consecutive years.
Wait, let me push back on that a bit. Senator Thune is blaming the Democrats for halting the NDAA over Iran, but isn't using a must-pass bill for leverage, a standard parliamentary tactic. Both parties do it when they're in the minority.
They do, yes.
So why is this specific instance uniquely catastrophic to a 65-year streak? Why is the Senate so uniquely vulnerable to this kind of gridlock compared to the House?
That's a crucial distinction about procedural leverage. The Senate operates on fundamentally different rules than the House. In the House, the majority party rules with an iron fist through the Rules Committee. If you have the votes, you pass the bill.
Right.
But the Senate relies heavily on unanimous consent to move quickly, and it still retains the filibuster for most legislation. That means individual members and the minority party have significantly more power to halt legislation.
So it's easier to throw sand in the gears over there.
Exactly. When a massive foreign policy crisis escalates, like the situation in Iran, senators will use the biggest moving vehicle available, in this case the NDAA, as leverage. They hold it hostage to force a debate or demand specific conditions on the commander-in-chief's war powers.
That makes sense.
The 65-year streak is a massive point of institutional pride, but the urgency of a real-world conflict often supersedes institutional tradition.
But even in the middle of that intense gridlock over defense policy and war powers, the Senate and the House shared a pretty profound moment of institutional memory. They paused the legislative combat to mourn the late Senator Lindsey Graham, whose recent passing was recognized in both chambers.
Yeah, the tributes were deeply bipartisan and spanned across both chambers. We saw Representatives Wilson and Edwards in the House and Senator Blackburn in the Senate, among many others, speaking at length about his legacy.
Right.
Senator Blackburn specifically highlighted his decades of work on complex, thorny issues like immigration, national security, and elections.
It's a powerful reminder that, behind the voting records, the procedural warfare, and the partisan gridlock, these are people who spend decades working together. They fight all day on the floor, but they still respect the human element of the institution.
And that human element is driven by the massive systemic pressures they face. Which brings us to the most revealing part of the congressional record. What happens when the scheduled votes are over, the galleries empty out, and the sun goes down?
The after hours. The special orders. This is genuinely my favorite part of watching Congress.
It's fascinating.
During the day, they are squabbling over a few $1,000,000 for a global climate fund or a specific amendment. But at night, during special orders, they speak to an empty chamber, but a national television audience on C-SPAN, and the real existential dread of the country spills out onto the floor. It's like the legislative subconscious of the republic.
That's a perfect description. The mechanism of special orders allows members to reserve block time to speak on any topic they choose without the time constraints of a standard floor debate. And the topics during this session were incredibly heavy.
Yeah, they were.
Representative Schweikert delivered a stark mathematical warning about the national debt crisis. He pointed out, using incredibly detailed charts, that the United States is currently borrowing $90,000 every single second.
Okay, let that sink in for a minute. $90,000 a second.
It's staggering. He noted that we are rapidly tracking toward a $40 trillion national debt. And he was very clear about the structural cause.
What was his argument?
He argued it's largely driven by an aging demographic and formulaic mandatory spending like Medicare and Social Security, not the discretionary agency budgets they argue about all day. He warned that we are reaching a tipping point where nations like Greece will actually have better forward credit ratings than the United States.
Wow. There's a massive irony here, too. I mean, by the time the House finished debating a single daytime amendment over a few $1,000,000, the national debt had grown by millions more. That's the disconnect between the daytime theater and the nighttime reality.
Exactly.
Speaking of efficiency and spending, we also heard fiery speeches from Representatives Stansbury and Hoyle officially declaring the end of the Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE.
Right. This was the initiative that had been led by Elon Musk. During their special order time, they characterized the entire project as a reality TV show.
Ouch.
Yeah. According to their floor speeches, DOGE promised $2 trillion in savings, but ultimately failed to make any meaningful impact on the structural spending Schweikert was just talking about. Instead, they argued, it resulted only in dismantled agencies and what they called a direct attack on dedicated public servants.
And it wasn't just the budget keeping members up at night either. The existential dread extended to the Constitution itself. We saw the Defend the 14th Amendment Task Force take the floor. This group, led by Representatives Mejia, Cleaver, and Randall, was responding directly to Trump administration executive orders that targeted birthright citizenship.
They used their time to frame this as a fundamental constitutional crisis. They argued that the 14th Amendment's explicit guarantee that anyone born in the United States is a citizen is under direct, unprecedented siege.
Right.
They drew historical parallels to the post-Civil War era and the Civil Rights Movement, stating very clearly that constitutional rights don't just disappear overnight in one fell swoop. They are eroded piece by piece, executive order by executive order.
So what does this all mean for us? We start the day unanimously naming clinics for local heroes, proving the system can actually work. We spend the afternoon bitterly fighting over how to fund the globe, stress testing our ideological divides, and then we spend the evening speaking to an empty room, terrified of going bankrupt or losing the foundational text of the Constitution.
It means that Congress is a real-time reflection of a nation grappling with its identity on multiple fronts simultaneously. The local achievements show that the mechanics of governance still function on a micro level.
Yeah.
The global appropriations debates show deep, unresolved ideological divides over America's role in the world. And those after-hours speeches reveal the massive systemic pressures, debt, demographics, constitutional interpretation that threaten the foundation of the entire enterprise.
Before we wrap up, I just want to express my deepest gratitude to you, the listener, for coming on this journey through the halls of Congress with us today. Remember, you can help keep this ad-free, nonpartisan civic education resource sustainable by clicking the Buy Me a Coffee link in the episode description.
And if you want to take actionable steps based on what you heard today, you can find the actual text of the bills we discussed, like H.R. 8595 or those VA clinic naming bills, by visiting congress.gov. You can read exact language yourself.
Absolutely. I highly encourage you to find your local representative's contact info, call their office, ask about their upcoming votes. or express your views on the national debt, foreign aid, or birthright citizenship. Democracy does not end at the ballot box. It requires your daily participation.
The transparency is built into the system if you are willing to look for it. The debate is ongoing right now, and your voice is supposed to be a part of it.
I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over. Today we saw Congress successfully and unanimously honor local veterans, proving they have the capacity to work together. But we also saw them bitterly divide over how to fund our global alliances, all while borrowing $90,000 every single second.
Yeah.
So as you look at your own community and the issues you care about, think about this. How long can local bipartisan victories sustain us if the broader national and economic structures are buckling under the weight of partisan gridlock? Until next time, keep diving deep.